For months now, people have argued over the same questions. Was Nancy Guthrie targeted? Did someone close to her know more than they admitted? Did investigators miss something important during those first critical days? If you spend enough time reading comments, watching interviews, or listening to podcasts, you'll notice something unusual. Many people are discussing the same case, but they are talking about completely different versions of it. Some are convinced the answer has been sitting in plain sight from the beginning. Others believe every new development proves investigators started from the wrong place. And then there are those who think the biggest mistake isn't what the FBI has done at all. They believe it's what the rest of us have assumed. Today we're going to slow down and look at the case from a different angle. Not to prove one theory, not to dismiss another, but to separate what is known, what remains uncertain, and what many people may be overlooking, because sometimes the loudest conversation isn't the most accurate one. That brings us back to the beginning. When Nancy Guthrie disappeared, the first reports created an understandable sense of urgency. Family members, neighbors, volunteers, and law enforcement all moved quickly. As they often do in missing person investigations, those first hours were filled with incomplete information. Witnesses tried to remember small details. Friends searched through recent conversations. Investigators worked to establish a timeline, while new information continued arriving almost by the hour. Those early days often shape public opinion more than any other period of an investigation. People naturally form first impressions. Once those impressions settle in, changing them becomes difficult, even when new facts emerge. Records show investigators gathered digital evidence, interviewed people connected to Nancy's daily life, and examined locations that could help explain where she had gone. According to public reporting, the investigation expanded as additional agencies became involved, bringing more resources and specialized expertise. At first, that seems straightforward. A larger investigative team usually means more eyes examining the evidence. But larger investigations also create another challenge. Information begins arriving from many different directions. Some details become public, others remain confidential. Rumors start filling the spaces between confirmed facts. That pattern has appeared repeatedly throughout the Nancy Guthrie case. Every week seemed to produce another headline, another theory, another interpretation. Some stories focused on surveillance footage, others emphasized digital records. Some centered on statements made by people close to the investigation. Meanwhile, thousands of viewers online tried connecting pieces that investigators themselves had not publicly connected. That's understandable. When a case remains unsolved, people naturally search for patterns. But finding patterns and proving them are two different things. One former FBI investigator explained during a public discussion that missing person investigations often become harder, not easier, the more public attention they receive. That may sound surprising. Public awareness helps generate tips. It keeps a case alive. It encourages witnesses to come forward. But it also produces something investigators constantly have to manage: noise. Imagine receiving hundreds or even thousands of tips. Some are valuable. Many are sincere but mistaken. Others repeat rumors that have circulated online for weeks. Investigators cannot simply ignore them. Each credible lead has to be examined. That process takes time, and while that work is happening behind the scenes, the public often assumes nothing is happening at all. That misunderstanding appears in many high-profile cases. Nancy Guthrie's investigation is no exception. Another point that experts frequently emphasize involves timelines. People often imagine investigations unfolding like television dramas. A clue appears. Detectives immediately know where to go. Within hours, another clue confirms the answer. Real investigations rarely work that way. Instead, investigators spend enormous amounts of time confirming information before acting on it. If one witness remembers seeing a vehicle, investigators don't simply accept the description. They compare it with surveillance footage, license plate readers, phone records, travel times, weather conditions, other witness statements. Only then does that detail become more reliable. That kind of work rarely produces dramatic headlines, but it often determines whether a case eventually moves forward. One misunderstanding surrounding the Nancy Guthrie case involves expectations. Many people expected investigators to release every important development as soon as it happened. Former federal investigators have repeatedly explained why that usually doesn't happen. If authorities publicly reveal every piece of evidence they possess, they also reveal it to anyone who may be responsible. Holding back certain information allows investigators to test future statements. If someone claims knowledge that only investigators should possess, that detail suddenly becomes significant. That strategy has been used in numerous criminal investigations over the years. It may frustrate the public, but according to investigators, it can also protect the integrity of the case. Then something unexpected happened. As months passed, public attention didn't disappear. Instead, it changed. The conversation shifted from asking where Nancy might be to examining every interview, every public appearance, and every reported development for hidden meaning. A pause during an interview became a discussion. A change in wording became another discussion. Someone declining to answer a question became another discussion. Social media amplified each observation. Some viewers believed these moments revealed deception. Others argued they revealed nothing at all. Behavioral experts frequently caution against making strong conclusions based solely on public appearances. Stress affects people differently. Grief affects people differently. Fear affects people differently. Someone may appear calm while experiencing enormous emotional strain. Another person may appear nervous despite having done nothing wrong. That doesn't mean behavior has no investigative value. It certainly can, but professionals generally combine behavioral observations with physical evidence, digital records, witness testimony, and forensic findings before reaching conclusions. Viewed separately, behavior tells only part of the story. That would have been the end of it, but another detail stood out. Throughout the investigation, discussion about digital evidence continued growing. Modern investigations often involve smartphones, messaging applications, cloud accounts, GPS records, surveillance cameras, financial transactions, and countless electronic footprints created during ordinary daily life. People sometimes imagine deleting a message makes it disappear forever. Investigators know that isn't always true. Depending on the platform, backup systems, service providers, device history, and legal access, pieces of digital activity may still be reconstructed. Exactly what investigators possess in the Nancy Guthrie case has not been fully disclosed publicly. And that's an important distinction. Public reporting rarely reflects everything investigators know. In fact, some of the most important evidence in major cases remains sealed until arrests occur, or sometimes until trial. That uncertainty has fueled endless speculation. Every time investigators revisit an area, people assume they have discovered something entirely new. Sometimes that's true. Other times, they're simply verifying older information using improved technology, or following up after receiving additional witness statements. Investigative work is often repetitive. Professionals revisit locations, re-interview witnesses, review surveillance footage multiple times, compare reports created months apart. A small inconsistency that meant nothing in January may suddenly become important in June after another piece of evidence appears. To the public, that can look like investigators are going backward. To experienced investigators, it's often part of moving forward. Perhaps the most overlooked aspect of the Nancy Guthrie investigation is the amount of work the public never sees. Search warrants, laboratory testing, digital analysis, interviews conducted away from cameras, tips evaluated and quietly ruled out, records reviewed line by line. Former investigators often say successful cases are built on patient work rather than dramatic breakthroughs. The public remembers the arrest. Investigators remember the months spent eliminating possibilities one after another. That difference in perspective matters, because while many people online ask why the case hasn't been solved yet, investigators may be asking a very different question. Have we ruled out every reasonable explanation before taking the next step? That's a slower process than most people expect. But history has shown that moving too quickly can be just as damaging as moving too slowly. As more attention focused on Nancy Guthrie's case, another issue quietly emerged. People began treating every new rumor as though it carried the same weight as verified evidence. Some stories spread across social media within hours. Others disappeared just as quickly after proving impossible to confirm. The challenge became separating information, supported by records, from information supported only by repetition. And that raises perhaps the biggest question of all. If so many people are debating the same investigation, why do respected investigators continue reaching such different conclusions about what matters most? Because the answer may not lie in one dramatic clue. It may lie in how all the smaller pieces fit together, and that's exactly where we'll pick up next. When investigators talk about building a case, they often compare it to assembling a puzzle. The comparison sounds simple enough, but there is one important difference. With a puzzle, you already know every piece belongs somewhere. In a criminal investigation, many of the pieces don't belong at all. Some are based on faulty memories. Some come from well-meaning witnesses who unintentionally remembered details incorrectly. Others are rumors that spread so widely they begin to feel like facts. One former FBI investigator once explained that the first job is often not proving a theory, it's eliminating the wrong ones. That may seem obvious, yet it is exactly where many public discussions surrounding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance begin to drift away from the investigation itself. People naturally become attached to the first explanation that makes sense to them. Once they settle on that explanation, every new development gets filtered through it. If a search takes place, they believe it confirms their theory. If investigators remain silent, they believe that also confirms their theory. When two completely opposite events are both interpreted as proof, it becomes impossible to evaluate the evidence fairly. That's something experienced investigators work very hard to avoid. Instead of asking, "Does this support my theory?" they ask, "What else could explain this?" That difference may seem small. In practice, it changes everything. Take witness interviews, for example. Television often portrays interviews as dramatic confrontations. Someone is questioned. A contradiction appears. The truth immediately follows. Real interviews are rarely that dramatic. Witnesses forget times. They confuse dates. They remember conversations differently. Two honest people can describe the same event in ways that don't perfectly match. That doesn't necessarily indicate deception. It indicates they're human. Investigators know this. That's why interviews are conducted repeatedly. Someone might remember an additional detail several weeks later after seeing a familiar location or hearing a familiar sound. Another witness might suddenly recall that a particular phone call happened before dinner rather than afterward. Small corrections like these can quietly reshape an entire timeline. According to investigators who have spoken publicly about similar cases, timelines are rarely completed in a single day. They evolve. That brings us to another subject that has generated constant discussion throughout the Nancy Guthrie investigation. Electronic evidence. Today's investigations leave behind far more than fingerprints. A mobile phone may reveal location history. A smartwatch may record movement. Vehicle systems sometimes preserve travel information. Businesses maintain surveillance footage. Financial institutions keep transaction records. Cell towers log device connections. None of these pieces automatically solve a case, but together, they often establish patterns. Patterns become timelines. Timelines become investigative direction. Many people assume investigators immediately understand what digital evidence means once they obtain it. That isn't necessarily true. Electronic records still require interpretation. A phone connecting to a tower doesn't always prove someone stood in one exact location. A GPS record may need additional verification. A deleted message may raise questions, but context still matters. Professionals compare one source against another before drawing conclusions. That process can take weeks or months, sometimes longer. One former federal investigator described digital evidence as both incredibly helpful and surprisingly incomplete. Technology records many things. It doesn't always explain why those things happened. A phone may show where it traveled. It cannot reveal every conversation that occurred beside it. A receipt may prove someone bought gasoline. It doesn't explain every stop made afterward. Those gaps are often where investigators spend the most time. At first glance, some observers believed the Nancy Guthrie investigation contained obvious answers hidden in plain sight. As additional information became public, those answers became less obvious. Each new development seemed to answer one question while creating two more. That pattern is common in long-running investigations. Instead of narrowing neatly toward one conclusion, evidence often expands before it contracts again. Then something unexpected happened. Attention gradually shifted toward the investigation itself. People began asking not only what happened to Nancy, but whether investigators had approached the case correctly from the beginning. Did they focus on the right leads? Did they move quickly enough? Should more information have been released earlier? Those are reasonable questions. Every major investigation receives scrutiny. Law enforcement agencies expect that. Constructive criticism can even improve future investigations. But experienced investigators also caution against judging decisions without knowing the evidence available at the time those decisions were made. It's easy to look backward with information that wasn't available on day one. It's much harder to make decisions while uncertainty surrounds nearly every fact. One retired FBI supervisor once remarked that investigations are judged twice, first in real time, then years later with the benefit of hindsight. The two judgments are often very different. Another area where public opinion frequently differs from investigative practice involves silence. When authorities decline to answer certain questions, many people immediately assume something is being hidden. Sometimes investigators are protecting witnesses. Sometimes laboratory testing is still underway. Sometimes prosecutors request confidentiality because releasing information too early could complicate future proceedings. And sometimes investigators simply don't know the answer yet. Saying "we don't know" rarely satisfies the public. But it is often the most honest answer available. That honesty can be mistaken for weakness. Professionals usually see it differently. They see it as discipline. One of the strongest impressions many viewers have formed about the Nancy Guthrie case is that every interview contains hidden clues. There is no question that interviews matter. Investigators study them carefully. They compare statements over time. They evaluate consistency. But professionals repeatedly warn against relying entirely on body language or facial expressions. Someone avoiding eye contact does not automatically indicate guilt. Someone speaking confidently does not automatically indicate innocence. Behavior may raise questions. Evidence answers them. That's a distinction worth remembering. Throughout the months following Nancy's disappearance, countless online discussions focused on individual moments. A sentence, a pause, an expression. Viewed in isolation, each appeared significant. 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 The public rarely has access to that complete file. Investigators do. That difference explains why outside observers and law enforcement sometimes reach very different conclusions using what appears to be the same case. Perhaps the biggest misunderstanding surrounding the investigation is the belief that every unanswered question represents investigative failure. In reality, unanswered questions exist in almost every major case. Some remain unanswered even after convictions. Investigators don't always learn every detail. They focus on proving what they can establish beyond reasonable doubt. That legal standard is much higher than public suspicion. Someone can appear suspicious without sufficient evidence to support criminal charges. Investigators understand that difference because they have to present evidence that survives courtroom scrutiny, not social media debate. That slower approach often frustrates families waiting for answers. It frustrates the public as well, but rushing toward an arrest without enough evidence risks allowing the wrong person to walk free later. History contains many examples of investigations delayed because authorities wanted stronger evidence before moving forward. Sometimes those decisions proved wise. Other times they became controversial. Without access to the complete investigative record, outside observers can only evaluate part of the picture. That is why experienced investigators are often cautious when offering opinions. They know how much remains unseen. Still, one issue continues to surface whenever experts discuss the Nancy Guthrie case: the importance of ordinary details. People often search for dramatic clues, a mysterious stranger, a shocking confession, a hidden recording. Yet many successful investigations are solved through something far less dramatic: a routine receipt, a forgotten phone call, a security camera from a business no one initially considered important, a witness who suddenly remembers seeing an unusual vehicle parked where it didn't belong. Those ordinary details rarely make headlines, but together, they can change the direction of an investigation. Which brings us to one final question before we move into the conclusion. If the public has been focusing on dramatic moments while investigators continue examining ordinary evidence behind the scenes, could the most important breakthrough still come from something that has seemed insignificant all along? Because history suggests that is often exactly how difficult cases are finally solved. By this point, one thing becomes clear. The Nancy Guthrie case has become two stories running side by side. The first is the investigation itself. The second is the public conversation surrounding it. Those stories occasionally overlap. Just as often, they move in completely different directions. That distinction matters because many of the strongest opinions circulating today are built on information that is incomplete, taken out of context, or simply impossible for the public to verify. That doesn't mean people shouldn't ask questions. Asking questions has always been part of public accountability. Families deserve answers. Communities deserve transparency whenever possible. Journalists have an important role in examining official statements and reporting new developments. But there is also value in recognizing where the evidence ends and where speculation begins. One of the biggest lessons former FBI investigators often share is that major cases are rarely solved by one spectacular discovery. Instead, they are solved by accumulation. A phone record confirms part of a timeline. A witness statement explains a previously confusing detail. Forensic testing rules out one possibility while strengthening another. Financial records reveal a pattern that seemed meaningless months earlier. Individually, each development may appear ordinary. Together, they begin to tell a story. That is why investigators frequently revisit evidence that has already been examined. To the public, it can look repetitive. To an experienced investigator, every review is another opportunity to notice something previously overlooked. Think about how many major criminal cases have eventually been solved because technology improved years after the original investigation. DNA testing has identified suspects decades later. Enhanced surveillance analysis has revealed details investigators couldn't previously see. Digital forensic techniques continue evolving, allowing experts to recover information once thought permanently lost. What seemed impossible 5 years ago may become routine today. That doesn't guarantee every case will be solved. But it does mean investigations are not always limited by the technology available on the day a person disappeared. The Nancy Guthrie investigation exists in that modern reality. Evidence collected months ago may become more valuable as analytical methods improve or as new information provides additional context. Another important point often gets overlooked. Investigators are not only trying to determine what happened, they are also trying to determine what they can prove. Those are two different objectives. Someone may privately believe a particular theory fits the available evidence. That belief alone is not enough. If prosecutors cannot establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, the case may not survive in court. Former FBI agents frequently remind audiences that an unsuccessful prosecution can make future accountability much harder. That is why investigators sometimes continue building a case even after they believe they understand what occurred. Patience can be frustrating. It can also be necessary. That brings us back to the title of today's discussion. What is everyone getting wrong? Perhaps the biggest misunderstanding is believing there must be one single explanation that answers every question. Real investigations are rarely that tidy. There may be mistakes made during the early search. There may also have been excellent investigative decisions that remain invisible because they happen behind closed doors. There may be witnesses who genuinely want to help but remember events imperfectly. There may be online theories containing one accurate observation, surrounded by several incorrect assumptions. Cases are complicated because people are complicated. What is everyone getting right? Most people agree on something very important. Nancy Guthrie deserves answers. Her family deserves answers. The investigators working the case understand the significance of that responsibility. Whether people praise the investigation or criticize it, nearly everyone shares the same hope, that reliable evidence will eventually provide clarity. And what is everyone missing? It may be the quiet work happening outside the spotlight. While social media debates continue, investigators often spend countless hours reviewing records, following up on tips, interviewing witnesses again, and comparing new information against evidence collected months earlier. None of that creates dramatic headlines. Most of it never becomes public. Yet that patient work has solved many difficult cases. History reminds us that breakthroughs often arrive without warning. A witness decides to come forward after months of silence. A forensic examination uncovers a detail previously missed. Someone recognizes a vehicle, a photograph, or a seemingly ordinary object from years earlier. An old lead becomes relevant because a completely different piece of evidence finally explains it. These developments rarely happen according to a predictable schedule. They happen when enough pieces finally connect. That uncertainty is difficult for families. It is difficult for investigators. And it is difficult for everyone who has followed Nancy Guthrie's story from the beginning. It is also why responsible reporting matters. Every headline has the potential to inform or to confuse. Every interview has the potential to provide useful context or to create unnecessary distraction. Every online discussion has the potential to encourage thoughtful analysis or to spread rumors that investigators must spend valuable time evaluating. As viewers, readers, and community members, we all play a role in that environment. Supporting verified reporting. Recognizing the difference between confirmed facts and speculation. Remaining open to new evidence, even when it challenges our initial assumptions. Those habits don't solve cases by themselves, but they help create a conversation grounded in evidence rather than emotion. Months into the investigation, there are still questions without public answers. There are still details investigators have not fully disclosed. There are still people watching closely, hoping the next development will finally provide the clarity everyone has been waiting for. Until that day comes, the most accurate position may also be the least satisfying. Some questions remain unanswered. Some evidence remains confidential. Some conclusions simply cannot be reached based on the information currently available to the public. Accepting uncertainty isn't giving up. It's recognizing the difference between what we know, what we suspect, and what we simply don't know yet. As this case continues to develop, those distinctions will matter more than ever. If credible new information emerges, it deserves careful attention. If a rumor begins circulating without evidence, it deserves careful skepticism. That balanced approach is the one experienced investigators return to again and again. Not because it is exciting, because it is reliable. The Nancy Guthrie case has captured national attention for a reason. It raises difficult questions about investigations, public expectations, digital evidence, witness memory, and the challenge of separating fact from speculation. Eventually, the hope is that those questions will be answered through verified evidence rather than assumptions. Until then, every confirmed fact deserves careful consideration. Every credible lead deserves proper investigation, and every conclusion should remain anchored to what can actually be established. We'll continue following this case as new, verified developments emerge. If you've been following the Nancy Guthrie investigation from the beginning, I'd like to hear your perspective. What do you think has been the most misunderstood part of this case? And what piece of verified evidence do you believe deserves more attention? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this breakdown helpful and appreciate careful, fact-based coverage of ongoing investigations, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps us continue bringing you thoughtful analysis whenever credible new developments arise. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next case.